Souvenir Part 2 is finally coming out this week, and I know many people adore the first part, but honestly, I was not a big fan of it. So, again, my expectations were not that high for Part 2. I didn't know how I was going to feel, but damn, was this a massive improvement over the first part, and what an amazing movie this was. What's going on, buddy? Welcome back to a brand new movie review. Today we're going to be discussing A24's latest movie, The Souvenir Part 2, which of course is the sequel to The Souvenir. In the aftermath of her relationship, Julie begins to entangle her fraught love for him in making her graduation film and sorting facts from her elaborate constructed fiction that had happened in the first part. This is directed and written by Joanna Hogg. It stars Tilda Swinton, Honor Swinton, Byrne, and Alice McMillan, and even Richard Ayoade, who I love Richard, and I love when he shows up in things. The Souvenir Part 2 was not a movie I was looking forward to. Part 1 I saw for the first time, and I was excited because I heard a lot of good things about it, but then I walked out and I was just like, that wasn't my cup of tea. So going into the second part, I heard also great things. Maybe that was even better than the first one, and thankfully it was. I actually really much appreciate more about the first one is how this feels like a souvenir, no pun intended, for the director Joanna Hogg and everything that she was able to really much develop. And I think that is one of the most important pieces of this entire filmmaking. And the thing that I can really much look into this entire movie is the way that this movie is structured and brought about. This isn't a movie for general movie-going audiences. And in a sense, this isn't even a movie for just anyone. This has to be a movie that I feel like is people who love A24 or also just love filmmaking. And you also need to see Part 1. So if you weren't a fan of Part 1 or have not seen Part 1, you do need to see it before Part 2. And I recommend doing a recap or something of that nature before Part 2 because it literally kicks off right afterwards. And it feels like a great dynamic back-to-back. And while I didn't love the first part, in fact, I was very disappointed by that movie, I appreciate it more now. And I feel like as a two constructive arced movie, as like a 3.5-hour film, if you put these both together, it makes for a wonderful and incredible piece of filmmaking, because the first film is a little bit more dramatic and sorrow and tough to watch and get through, where the second part is more optimistic, ambitious, and in a sense, very dynamic, and actually shows a lot more of Hogg's directing style that I really appreciated and absolutely adored at times. Of course, if you guys are new here and you love early movie reviews or just in general love talking movies, this is the right channel for you guys. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, as well as comment down below your guys' thoughts. Have you guys seen the original Souvenir? Are you excited for Part 2? Well, let's discuss it all down below. Starting with my pros, like any other review, The Souvenir Part 2 has some amazing performances. Tilda Swinton's always great in the roles that she does, but truly enough, this is the big standout of it all is Honor Swinton Byrne, who plays Julie, the main protagonist in here. She was great in the first part, and she's even better in Part 2. I was truly blown away with her performance in here. And as well as I mentioned, Richard Ayoade shows up in here, and I thought he was just fantastic. Can we get more of him in film right now? I also do think that Hogg, the writer and director of this, and of course Honor, they work in strides and wonder with one another in the way that the story is supposed to be told, and it really much feels like a souvenir to Hogg's entire life, and it feels like an important piece of filmmaking, not just from her, but you can feel the passion coming and pouring onto the screen, especially within Honor's life, and seeing how she is pretty much putting together her graduation film and actually seeing that film come to life. It's very poignant and in a sense kind of meta to our entire world, and especially into the movie Cinemverse. But there's something about this movie that made it feel special overall, and something that I wasn't really expecting. I think the cinematography in this movie is absolutely astounding. Part 1 had some really good cinematography as well, but I think there's something special about here, and especially when it comes down to the graduation stuff, that's the most important piece. Even adding in there, on a technical level, this movie is a masterpiece. That is where this movie really exceeds, and you can feel the growth from Part 1 to Part 2 and how it much elevated all of that to that next level, and seeing this character progress. That's why I think this movie makes for a really good double feature, and if you put the two films together, it does feel like a full continued story, and I think that's why I actually appreciated this more together than I did just the first one alone. I'm glad that Part 2 is now out there in the world, because I do feel like that people should experience it and experience this unique thing that A24 has put together with Hogg. One of the ballsiest things that I always see, and Hogg did this in the first part, but it's even more masterful in Part 2, is the way that she uses not that much of a score And a lot of the scenes are not drawn out. It feels like you are actually in Honor's shoes walking around with her, feeling and endearing every single element that she is truly going through. Which I think that's where we go to my mixed aspects. And now, I was not mixed on this. I could see other people being mixed on the pacing, the slowness of it all, and someone walking up to the movie theater not knowing what this movie is, watching it and being absolutely confused. This is very much a direct sequel to Part 1, and if you haven't seen Part 1, I don't even think this movie would work for you at all. It was funny, I was actually deciding if I should watch Part 1 before Part 2, and doing like a weird review where I was like, oh yeah, I've never seen Part 1, let's see how Part 2 is, and thank God I watched Part 1 because I would have been absolutely confused the entire time watching this film. That's where we go to my cons, and one of my main cons that kind of holds this film a little bit back for me on a grasping level is while I felt like I was in Honor's shoes and I feel the passion and anticipation and everything about this movie, there was just something that made me feel like I was at arm's length with the character still on an emotional level. And maybe that's just for me personally, but I could possibly see other people falling in love with this film a little bit harder than I was. I'm more on the appreciation level. Even though I appreciate the first one and I do adore this one at least, it's still in that appreciation thing and not a lovely thing. And in a sense, this is actually not a movie that I find myself ever feeling like I'll want to go back to. I could easily recommend it to film fanatics out there and cinephiles, but I don't know if I could ever tell myself, yeah, I want to go watch The Souvenir Part 1 and Part 2 again, because you do need to watch both of them back to back. I couldn't just see, yeah, I'm going to pop in Part 2 right now to watch it. You know, that's no really much con against the entire movie, but the way that I view film is also rewatchability being a big piece of it, and this just isn't one of the films that I would, but I am very happy that I at least experienced this film. And I think that's what the Souvenir does so well, and it's tough. I don't even want to call it Part 1 and Part 2 because it is one singular big story here that is made to be experienced by cinephiles and people who love movie. Joanna Hogg is a fantastic director here, and I can't wait to see what she really much puts to the test next. Swinton Byrne is amazing. Tilda Swinton is great. Richard Ayoade steals a lot of scenes, and I love the poignant and meta aspect of this all, and especially when it comes down to the filmmaking space. I found this movie to be better than the first one in a lot of different ways and quite brilliant. Again, wasn't a big fan of the first one, but I do appreciate a little bit more after watching Part 2, and I think if you weren't a fan of the first one, you should definitely still check out Part 2. If you've never seen Part 1, I don't know if you should see Part 2, but I do recommend, if you are a giant cinephile, mixing this film together and really much giving yourself a great double feature. So with all that said, I'm going to give The Souvenir Part 2 a B+. Thank you once again, guys, for watching this. You guys are seriously all the best. Can't wait to hear your guys' thoughts. What's your favorite A24 film so far this year? We've gotten quite a few good ones. And in general, guys, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Head on over to Sandwich on Films on how to see films early. And of course, it's a big thing to you and a big thing to my Patreon supporters, because without you, I would not be able to do this. So, of course, until next time, make sure to head on over to the Scottsdale International Film Festival to get your tickets now. And until next time, stay classy.